One of the biggest challenges that people face is that we go through a process of developing insight on the spiritual path. So insight into what I call the seventh octave. Seventh octave is the understanding of the absolute. When we don't have any pre-context for that, it transcends the intellect. It kind of bypasses the intellect. And when it bypasses the intellect doesn't get a taste of how it got there. So what happens is we end up recreating the same ignorance again and again and again. It's like being taken to the top of the mountain, but still having the intellect that you developed at the bottom of the mountain. So it doesn't matter when you or how you get to the top. If you do not know the path, if the intellect hasn't seen the way to get there, what happens is you recreate the developmental stages that you went through from infant to teenager to adult, which is what I call the first, second, third, and fourth octaves. The developmental stages of learning to play, learning to create, developing reason, developing logic. And what happens is we end up going through a cycle of recreating the same experience over and over and over again, no matter what insight we've had. So this is why people who have psychedelic breakthroughs do not maintain those breakthroughs, because what they're doing is, imagine as a child we went through a process of developing this intellect, which is kind of what creates experience moment by moment, this part of our mind. It recreates the story, the narrative, the beliefs, and the beliefs solidify the worldview. The worldview creates, therefore, the experience that we have of duality, and therefore, in some cases, separation. Separation is literally recreated every single moment with every perception. When they say that the universe was created in every moment, it is created in every moment, it literally is. And so too are you being reborn every moment. So it's important to know that just like symbolically we have the infant that goes to the teenager, to from the child to the teenager to the adult, developing experience, we are doing this instantaneously in every single moment. We are literally recreating the entire process. But because we have this, what we call knowledge in between, we have understanding, it happens instantaneously, instead of in the symbolic process of developmental stages. So in order to now bridge the gap from the top of the mountain, from the bottom to the top of the mountain, the intellect now has to be retrained, you could say. And in order to retrain the intellect, we do that by removing knowledge. So just like to get to this experience of duality, we had to get knowledge. Now we just go through removing knowledge. It's very simple. But it's not so simple, because the knowledge we've created, we've identified with, and we believe that is fundamentally what we are. When that's an issue, because that's going to feel like dying to you. From your point of view, it will feel like the process of death. It's what we call the ego death, the death of what we believe we are. So imagine that we're born in this world. Relatively speaking, we technically had to die somewhere else to be born here, right? Symbolically now is the start of our death, which is also symbolically the start of our birth, the start of our awakening. But see, the awakening is a very different thing, because there's awakening where we have the traditional enlightenment. The enlightenment that you know from the Buddhist traditions gets you to the place where you understand the glimpse of the seventh octave, which is the understanding of the absolute. Now, when you have a glimpse of the seventh octave with the worldview of the fourth octave, which is duality, which is the place where we learn to build relationships, where we learn to feed ourselves and feed a family and have kids. This is the world of duality. The worldview is crystallized there, the capacity to interact. Now you can imagine, for example, living on the seventh octave in the absolute is you're not living in the fourth. You see, this is where symbolic of Ramana Maharshi, where he sits and gets eaten by bugs and insects. So we don't just want to live in the seventh, we don't just want to live in the fourth, we want multidimensional experience. We want the capacity to master all levels of all octaves. So what we need to see is that this bridging of the gap is the development of the intellect internally. Usually in the first, second, third octaves, basically when you're a child, a teenager, an adult, you're getting taught by everybody else. Everybody else is telling you what is true. It's telling you how to develop your intellect. They're telling you what this is. They're telling you what that is. Everything you currently know was given to you. You didn't see that for yourself. So the worldview that you currently have is still influenced by everybody else other than you. So the developmental stages post-awakening is about reintegrating your understanding of the mind and intellect internally. So basically, you take everybody off the pedestal, all your teachers, all your gurus, all your whoever's, and you put yourself in the leading authority, as the leading authority on truth. It's the only way you're going to be able to develop the intellect internally. So while you're developing this internal compass, which is more of an internal mastering of the mind, what you're going to be having is this very interesting experience of not knowing. And usually you think that advancement is to know more. This is very fifth octave. Fifth octave means that you've had a spiritual insight of the seventh octave, which is the understanding of the absolute, but you still have the conditioning of the fourth, which makes you in this seeking energy mode where you're still seeking, you still want to get back to that state that I once had, or find the happiness that I knew I had at one time. And what this does is keeps you in a perpetual cycle of seeking something other than what you're currently experiencing. The true grounded realization and experience is to be completely grounded in whatever it is you're experiencing. That's transcendent of all the octaves. When you're developing this process, the fifth octave says, I'm going to get more knowledge to remove my suffering. The last thing that someone who is attached to that fifth octave of experience is going to want to do is something that is the opposite of that. So in order to transition through these octaves, you must let go of the previous octave. In essence, you must let go of the attachment to it, which means in the sixth octave, you have fun and remove knowledge, which means you have to go through a process of not knowing. Basically, you just don't know what comes next. You don't know what you are. You don't know this. You don't know that. You're not clinging to knowledge. And only then in that openness are you able to actually process and digest this understanding of truth. This is where the nervous system integration comes into this aspect of the path. What is commonly unnoticed is that we think in the fifth octave, which is the spiritual seeking paradigm octave, where we seek truth and enlightenment and spiritual awakening using practices in order to get and achieve a state which will never come. When we're in that paradigm, the last thing we want to do is do things for fun, basically. But it's the one thing required for this understanding to be processed, because that's how you will process things. You can't process things in a subtle survival mode where you're subtly trying to remove suffering. You process things when you're having fun. So if your therapy is fun, it's a done deal. The minute you find it fun, it's like instantaneous. It's like if you work out, right? You've got two workouts, one that you find really boring, one that you find really fun. The one that you find really fun, you're going to work harder, you're going to do more work, and it's going to be easier, and you're going to be processing it because you're having fun. The one you find really boring, it's going to be harder, it's going to feel harder, it's going to be harder on your body, and you're not going to process and recover properly because you just don't find it fun. So finding it fun is very, very important. It's a very spiritual experience to have fun. And it goes completely under the rug, under the radar. We think having fun is just for kids. And on the spiritual path, it should be really serious. No, it's the opposite. We want to be more like kids, right? This is what the sixth octave is about. The sixth octave is the second octave. The second octave is where the child learns to play for the sake of playing, right? How magic is that? Let's play. Why do we want to play? I don't know, because it's fun. Why is it fun? I don't know. It's causeless rationality. In other words, it makes sense, but I don't know why it makes sense, which doesn't make sense technically, right? So this is the blueprint of reality. Reality is. Why? Because. Simply because. Why is it because? I don't know. Because, right? This is life. So we're learning to be more like what we are as a physical expression in this form. And that literally just looks like having fun. Isn't that beautiful to realize that? So the sixth octave is where we learn to have fun again. In the fifth octave, we're not having fun. We're seeking spiritual states. We're trying to get rid of our suffering, and everything's a problem, and everything's just taking too long, right? This is why we need to make this transition. The sixth octave, adventure mode. You've seen me make videos in the adventure mode. If you haven't, checked them out. This is sixth octave stuff. This is what transcends you to the seventh. It's what makes the seventh possible. Then you move into the eighth, where all the octaves are transcended. You enjoy them all. So you've got to think of this system as every level and dimension of experience supports the quality and richness of the other, just like words in a poem. So it's not like you're in the fifth, oh my God, they're so low, or you're only in the fourth. No. Every octave is a part of the same system. It's this part of the same experience. You have to experience them all. It's the only way that you can enjoy the full capacity of life, full capacity of experience. Because we still enjoy the second octave. How many times have you seen a baby and done the baby voice, or seen a dog and do, oh, you're so cute, right? You go into the second octave. You don't do that on the fourth octave when you're speaking to your boss or your manager or your friend, right? Sometimes maybe with friends, you go into the second, third octaves. You're more playful. You've all heard of the starving artist, people stuck in the third octave. They don't develop the fourth. They can't make money. They can't build relationships. They can't live in the world. All these octaves, they're there to help you master the others. You see, if you master the third, you actually could be better at mastering the fourth. Why? Because you're able to create. Third octave is about creation for the sake of play. So all of this stuff, once it's integrated, it has to go to the body. You don't integrate truth. You integrate the body. You are truth. You don't integrate truth. Sunlight doesn't integrate sunlight. You can't integrate what you are, right? What can happen is that you get mastering of the body. You master the body, you master the mind. You start being able to use these tools to full capacity. So you actually master the character. You don't master truth. Truth doesn't need to be mastered, you see? Once you get better at wearing the suit of the body, so to speak, and playing with the resources of the mind, truth is effortlessly integrated. And that comes down to the nervous system. So basically, we have this idea that we must integrate truth, and that idea of integrating truth just sabotages the true integration of the character, the person that you are. You kind of want to max out on your character. This is the best way I can describe it. You want to be able to max out on who and what you are as an individual. And this will be a natural consequence of understanding what you are without trying to make an effort to enforce this some kind of integration of truth. You just simply have fun and be curious. It's profound to me how simple it is and how hard that is to understand, how hard it is to somehow just get that it is that simple. Be curious and have fun. It sounds almost too good to be true. Like, is that really it, Saja? I just got to be curious and have fun? Literally, yes. I'm not even making an understatement or an overstatement. It's just that simple. If you're interested in this process, what I recommend is doing things that allow you to retrain the system that your intellect has built. Your intellect, for example, will look at an object. Your intellect doesn't look at an object, but hypothetically speaking and poetically speaking, when you look at an object, and you are still have the intellect that runs on separation mode. Separation mode means you perceive duality, which is fine. That's fourth octave, necessary experience. But problem is that when other people have taught you and you haven't taught yourself, your intellect comes from external, not internal, you will be convinced that duality is fundamentally real. When you're convinced duality is fundamentally real, the problem with that is that you create separation. Separation is the belief everything is separate. So in other words, it looks separate, but it isn't separate, is what is true. And what is false is it looks separate and it is separate is what is false. And that's what makes you suffer, you see. You must, if you're interested, for the sake of fun and exploration, like a science project, look at what is creating these limitations. It could be fun to explore that. It could be fun to think, wow, you're right, I am convinced that this object is separate from that object fundamentally and that they are made of separate substances. I wonder why. Have I ever explored the substance for myself? Have I ever tried to touch the object? Have I ever tried to see the object fully? Because right now I'm seeing colors, I'm seeing textures, but how do I know the textures are there? To what extent is the texture imagined as an external concept based on something I've touched in the past? Do my sights and my sensations correlate? Are they 100% accurate? No, they're not, but I won't spoil it for you. Explore this. These are interesting questions to ask. If you have any more questions that you don't know how to answer, I have a free community where I can help you answer those questions. I also am launching an academy, which is something that I recommend keeping in mind for when you feel ready after joining the free group. Links in the description. Have a beautiful day. Take care.